ABC Kinderteach presents A Different Pond, written by Bao Phi, illustrated by Thi Bui. Dad wakes me quietly so Mom can keep sleeping. It will be hours before the sun comes up. In the kitchen, the bare bulb is burning, which means this bare bulb light is on. And in many houses, you don't have a light like this. Usually it's a little bit more fancy. It just usually means that somebody's living in a place that does not cost as much as maybe some more expensive places. "Can I help?" I ask. "Sure," my dad whispers and hands me the tackle box. And this is what a tackle box looks like. You put all your fishing supplies in there. The street lights look brighter and the roads aren't so busy before the sun comes up. Dad turns on the heater and tells me stories. A kid at my school said my dad's English sounds like a thick, dirty river, which means he says his voice does not sound very good when he speaks English. But to me, his English sounds like gentle rain. So this boy thinks that when his dad talks, his dad's voice sounds very calm and makes him feel very at home and safe. We stop at the bait store on Lake Street. It always seems to be open. "You're here early today," the bait man says. "I got a second job," my dad explains. "I have to work this morning." "On a Saturday?" the bait man asks. My dad nods. So they must be getting up early to fish because his dad has to go back home when they're done and go to work. I feel the bag of minnows move. They swim like silver arrows in my hands. And this is what a minnow looks like. It's still dark when we get to the pond. We park the car and climb over the divider between the road and the trees, and there's a divider. My dad holds my hand and walks ahead through the tangle and scrub. And tangle and scrub is just branches and other sorts of weeds that are growing up, and they are sometimes sticky and it's just hard to walk through. "Step where I step," he says. I am thinking about what Dad told the bait man. "If you got another job, why do we still have to fish for food?" I ask. "Everything in America costs a lot of money," he explains. I feel calluses on his hands, and those are hard bumps usually from working with your hands, when he squeezes mine. So this is what a divider looks like this. This is what tangle and scrub might look like. And these bumps on their hands right there, those are what they call calluses. They're just really, really hard. And again, it's usually from working with your hands a lot. Sometimes a Hmong man, and that's a person from Asia, is at the pond. He speaks English like my dad and likes to tell funny jokes. Sometimes there's a black man there too. He shows me his colorful lure collection. And it's just some plastic and metal that look like a fish. And then the other fish will bite it and then they can eat those bigger fish. This time it is just me and my dad. It is a little bit cold. I rub my hands together, yawn, and look up to see faint stars like freckles. And when they say stars like freckles, the stars up in the sky look like freckles to him. which they kind of do, don't they? As Dad sets up in a clearing, and a clearing might look like this. It's usually a place that does not have trees, but it's oftentimes surrounded by trees. I gather small, thin twigs for a fire, sticks. They need to be dry and clean. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 10 more for later. I put some rocks in a circle and set up the twigs. Like a volcano, Dad reminds me. I set one end of each twig down, the other up, leaning them in so they rest against each other and hold each other up. I get it to light with just one match. Dad nods. You want to put a minnow on the hook? Dad asks. I want to help, but I shake my head no. I don't want to hurt that little fish, even if I know it's about to be eaten by a bigger one. My dad smiles. He isn't upset with me. Dad hands me a sandwich, cold bologna between two pieces of bread. Careful of the spicy stuff, he says. There's half a peppercorn, like a moon split in two, studded into the meat. I used to fish by a pond like this one when I was a boy in Vietnam, Dad says, biting into his sandwich. With your brother? I ask. He nods, then looks away. Dad tells me about the war, but only sometimes. He and his brother fought side by side. One day, his brother didn't come home. So in Vietnam, they were having to fight in a war, and he fought with his brother, not against his brother, but with his brother. And one day, when he came back home, his brother never came back, so they don't really know what happened to him. The bobber dips in the dark, and Dad pulls. Got one, he says, almost shouting. And that's what a bobber looks like. This sits on top of the water, and then you have the little thing to hold it down. It's called a split shot weight. And then you have the hook, and that's where you put the minnow right there. And then when a fish bites it, it pulls it under, and then the bobber goes under, and then you know you have something biting your fishing line. A crappie, and soon another. Can I help? I ask. And that's what a crappie looks like. It's just a type of fish. He nods, and I use two hands to help guide the fish into the bucket. The fish feels slimy and rough at the same time. Dad laughs at the funny face I make. Dad smiles, his teeth broken and white in the dark, because we have a few fish and he knows we will eat tonight. So what they're saying is that they don't have very much money, and so they know that they're going to have enough food to eat tonight, and sometimes maybe they don't. Sometimes maybe they just have to do with less. Time to go home. Dad must get ready for work. He washes his hands with a small nub or small piece of green and white soap. Then I do the same. I look at the trees as we walk back to the car. I wonder what the trees look like at that other pond, the pond that his dad remembers when he was a boy, in the country my dad comes from. By the time we get home, the sunlight coming through the windows is just a faint tint, blue and gray instead of gold. And they're actually driving by these people that are homeless. He has all of his belongings in this grocery cart, and that's how he lives. He just moves from place to place and sleeps under the roads and other places. At home, Mom looks tired, but she smiles at the fish in the big white bucket. So his mom must have woken up while they were gone, and so she still looks tired though. My dad changes his clothes and gets ready to go to work. He pats me on the back and says to Mom, "Our boy did a good job with the fire today." "You learn so quickly," Mom says. Then she asked me to help with the fish before she has to go to work too. So both the mom and dad have to work on Saturday because it's just hard to make enough money to live sometimes when you're in the United States. I'm sad that she and Dad must leave, but not too sad. I know that later on they will both come home. Look after your baby brother, Mom reminds my brothers and sisters, so he must have older brothers and sisters. She means me, that's the baby brother. Then she gets on her bike and goes to work, so she rides to work on her bike. I am not a baby, I think to myself. I helped catch dinner. Tonight, when we are all home, Dad will put rice in the cooker and Mom will fry the fish on both sides until they are crispy. I will bring out the jar of fish sauce that has flecks of chili pepper and carrots floating on top. At the table, my brothers and sisters will tell funny stories. Mom will ask about their homework. Dad will nod and smile and eat with his eyes half closed, which means he's probably very, very tired after getting up early and working and doing that day after day. And there you can see his brothers and sisters. "Good fish," he will say to me. And I will smile and nod, and later when we sleep, we will dream of fish in faraway ponds. So the boy is saying, I'm going to be dreaming about fish in ponds in other countries, and his dad will probably too. This is notes from the person who wrote the story, the author. This is what he has to say. My family came to Minnesota from Vietnam, another country, as refugees from war, which means that they were escaping the war that was going on there, in 1975, and that's about 50 years ago. I was just a baby when we fled, the youngest of 6. My father was a soldier, but not a high-ranking officer, which means he wasn't a very important soldier. And my mom had worked at the snack shop at a school in Saigon, a city in Vietnam. We lived in the Phillips neighborhood of South Minneapolis, and we didn't have much of anything. Both my parents worked multiple jobs or more than one job to survive and support us in a country whose people did not understand why we were here at best and blamed us for the aftermath of the war at worst. So they thought that sometimes other people thought that they shouldn't be here in the United States. My father would sometimes take us fishing with him before the sun came up, but for food, not for sport. I was much less appreciative, which means he wasn't thankful, of this experience than the little boy in this story. But now that I am a father myself, I wanted to honor the struggle or how hard it was for his parents. I also want to acknowledge that they sometimes told me difficult stories about the war and where they came from, including dying and violence. My parents shared these stories with me not to scare or harm me, but because these bad things were a part of our lives and they wanted me to understand. I pass along a version of our story with those same intentions or that same purpose.